Welcome back to Panel 54, where real power meets real perspective. I'm Wawarun Joroge, and together with Ndu Okor, we take you beyond the headlines into the heart of Africa's most urgent conversations. In part 2 of my conversation with His Excellency John Kufuor, former President of Ghana, we go beyond the early years and into the heart of his presidency, from ushering in Ghana's golden age of business to striking oil, reforming health and education, and navigating diplomacy across Africa. We discuss the challenges of leadership, Africa's economic future, and the lessons he believes the next generation must learn to shape the continent's destiny. This is the conclusion of our special two-part series with one of Africa's most respected statesmen. And maybe you've already answered this as well, but my question still remains. In the AU in its current form, right, is it fit for purpose?
Well, it's a work in progress.
Work in progress.
The point is, very membership countries, they are still locked in the concepts of sovereignty of nation, and of course, given our checkered backgrounds, francophone, anglophone, lusophone, and so forth and so on, and apartheid, say, in South Africa.
Yes.
And the constitutional tenure, for instance, I came to power on a tenure of 4 years.
Yes.
What can you do in 4 years, really, to transform a huge continent like Africa?
That's true.
No matter how liberal you may think. And so and unfortunately, we've been so dependent on this arrangement so far.
Yeah.
So with a youngster who approached me with this idea of APIMI, Africa Public Interest. When he approached me, I met him in London. He said, Africa Public Interest, what is the public interest of Africa? I asked him, do you know Africa? 54 nations, all sovereign, independent, everybody guarding their sovereignty so jealously. How can you talk of public interest? Does the African of North Africa agree that is about the same as the one in West Africa or Southern Africa?
Exactly.
And then the idea of the digitalization came in. And then public media. I said, struck a bell. I said, yes, truly, if we could get a very conscious, determined, visionary institution using the media, not coming through the government agencies so much.
True.
To pick on the shared value systems, things that the man in the street, average person, would say, this is what I want. Africa would come to find that across its vast distances, there are some values that we should all share as human beings.
Absolutely. I think that sounds like a wonderful initiative.
And that would become the public interest, which would enable the ordinary citizen, average man, hold his or her leader to account.
Yeah.
If you are governing me and you are not meeting these things I believe in, then naturally I would withdraw my support from you.
I tend to have a bit of... I'm a naysayer sometimes because of what I've seen. I think my issue, personally, what I see the problem with is a lot of egos. I'm going to jump into leadership with you just now. But 54 nations, we cannot, first of all, agree on a single monetary unit to use. There's so many different ethnical groups.
When we begin to insert the demands of, say, economy,
yes,
and other interests, arts, and so forth and so on, we'll find a way. And we would come to accept that as humans, naturally, if we should all be one, then we wouldn't have different heads.
No, it would not be interesting.
Yeah. But we will come to a point where it becomes live and let live. Let's know the limits within which we can live in an enlightened way, or the limits beyond which perhaps we may not be able to agree, and then we should find a resolve our disagreements.
Every leader at some point, right, faces a moment with no easy answer. Right? A decision where every pathway, in whichever direction they basically chose, carries repercussions politically, morally, and very personally as well, obviously. So what I wanted to find out from you, these are moments that obviously build some character in a leader. Because a lot of the time, leaders aren't judged purely on their perfection or their outcomes, but the courage with which they actually manage to weather storms. What no-win situation did you find yourself in your presidency? You know, that moment where your leadership decision was between bad and worse in terms of your options. One situation where you found that you had that choice was...
I came to office. I said earlier, when the economy was in shambles, Ghana was described as insolvent. And you looked around, you just couldn't lay hands on a policy or some relief that would enable you begin to at least get to grips with the challenges that really were swamping the society. And the only thing I found, 2001, was to go to IMF.
Okay.
And IMF had fashioned a policy they called HIPIC, Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative. It wasn't palatable at all.
Yes.
It was so demeaning. In fact, the government before mine, under whose watch Ghana had fallen so low, they had a chance. They should have gone to IMF about 2 years earlier. That's about 99, to benefit from this unacceptable policy of IMF. But they didn't do it. So when I got elected, that was a fresh president with ministers, virtually none of whom had been in government before, to face this challenge. We were tearing our hair to find a way to free the nation and ourselves so we could carry on. I had promised golden age of business. How do we implement golden age of business without?
Yeah.
Then I got invited to some conference in Mali. There I met the then managing director of IMF, a German called Horst Kohler. He later became president of Germany. And then Mr. Wolfenson, who was the president of the World Bank.
Okay.
They all attended that international conference. And then a British minister, Claire Short, I think she was a minister under Tony Blair. During a break in deliberations at conference, these three people cornered me. And immediately I sensed they were sizing me up because I was the Johnny Justice, they say.
Johnny come lately.
The new boy
On the block.
Oh, yes, Mr. President. Congratulations. So, how's Ghana? And I started rambling off, Ghana, my government, for private sector, this, democracy. They all stood quiet, as if they were listening. But I could see in their eyes, they were testing me. And I took the lady, Claire Short, to shoot out. Oh, Mr. President, we all know Ghana. The point is, if you tell the truth about the state of affairs in your country, then whatever help you want, you may begin to get.
Okay.
But if you not tell us
the full picture,
then the help you want, you may not get. So I considered it a bit, and I also shot back at her. Look, yes, I think I know what you're talking about. Suppose I tell the truth about the state of affairs and I do not get the help. What becomes me?
Yeah.
How do I face the crowd in Ghana? Immediately she said, oh, please, if you really come up sincerely, then I believe my government, the British government, would lend a hand. And I sensed some genuineness in her. Then Mr. Heskola, the IMF managing director, also followed. Oh, yes, if you adopt the right policy, then I assure you I would use my good offices to help you get out in record time. And again, he looked in the eyes and saw he too was telling the truth.
Yeah.
When we finished the conference, I rushed back to Ghana, assembled my cabinet and my economic advisors, and again challenged them. My friends, I know none of us wants HIPIC. I want alternative to HIPIC. So we begin to really make the people feel the sort of policies we've come into government with. They tried no end, and nobody could provide an alternative. So on that, I summoned the finance minister, go to Parliament, tell Parliament the president has decided that Ghana is taking the HIPIC initiative.
Okay.
And there was mumbling and The finance minister, of course, had to obey, rushed to parliament and announced again in parliament. People sounded like objecting, but again, no alternative. And so we went to IMF. And I tell you, we worked so hard on ourselves with the way we managed our fiscal and monetary policies and kept ourselves from borrowing indiscriminately and all that. Within 2-3 years, we are out of HIPIC. And that's where we started attracting private sector investments, and the economy started shooting up. Even impinging on agriculture. So cocoa that had been, in terms of production, at its lowest levels, 350,000 tons a year, whilst Ivory Coast was producing over 1 million tons. Within 4 years of this, Ghana topped over 700,000 tons, all-time record since 1920.
Okay.
And then everything else started moving.
So it's one of those kind of, then I suppose that talks to what the whole aspect of leadership, having to make those kind of tough decisions. I don't think there's anybody ordinary Ghanaians or any ordinary citizen who would have gone or knows what you had to go through in order to.
Oh, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's not something that you necessarily talk
you
about.
put your neck on the block, as they say.
Yeah.
If it works.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask this earlier. So that is one particular decision you made as a head of state. Is there any other decision that you made that kept you up at night?
Well, into my second year,
okay,
a monarch in the northern part of Ghana was killed.
Oh, okay.
In a rather savage way. And again, it looked like a failure of security. And of course, my government, they say all things stops on the table. So it left me with sleepless because it was a very important tribe strategically. I think it's the biggest tribe in the north of Ghana.
Okay.
Dagbon. And unfortunately for me, my vice president hailed from that area.
Oh.
My national security advisor hailed from that.
Okay.
The minister of interior also hailed from the area. So our political opponent jumped at it and said, government must be implicated because we couldn't have all these important people hailing from. And then this important, very powerful chief got slaughtered that way. The situation became like a war situation. I couldn't sleep. First, I set up a commission of inquiry under a retired Supreme Court judge, a very credible team to investigate, to find the culprits and also whatever the causes truly were. The commission did its work, and I saw, in spite of the thoroughness of what they were trying to do, the commission wasn't making the impact with the people, the tribe. So again, it occurred to me that perhaps we should resort to traditional methods.
Okay.
Because it was a traditional, and the neighboring chiefdoms I approached to help me use the traditional approach to calm the people and then to try to find solutions. These two neighboring monarchs, they were all like in their 90s, doddering old men, highly respected, sitting on powerful tribes. But so then again, I delved into history and learned there was way back in history, perhaps centuries, there was connection between the slayed monarch and the king of Asante, who was a young man. Then, age-wise, must have been in his early 50s or so, and highly respected through the country. So I approached the king of Asante and entreated him to join the two old men, three monarchs, with him being the chairman, to talk with the factions, the two factions around the monarch that had been slain, to calm them down and to assure them my government was innocent, as far as I knew.
Yeah.
That would work with them to get solutions. Asante accepted. And within the first year, that's about from 2000 to 2003, they managed to get a roadmap for tackling the problem acceptable to the two sides of the divide in that tribe. The old men, the two old kings, within 2-3 years, they died off, leaving Asante King alone to tackle the challenge. I tell you, the challenge lasted for the next 17 years.
Wow.
I left office,
Yes.
but eventually
Okay.
the solution was found, and now the Dagbon people are resolved with a new king.
Okay.
That was another. But with help of history, I managed to find the link between the king of Asante and the Dagbons, which in a way provided the solution.
Okay.
But that was another matter.
Okay. Yeah. In fact, now you just mentioned that, and what you were talking about with the IMF, UK. Can you share with us a moment during your mediation work, ECOWAS or AU, that left a very deep emotional impact? You've given us a deep emotional impact that happened in Ghana, but in terms of now the bigger picture, anything that left a deep emotional impact, and whether that changed your view in terms of leadership and diplomacy. And obviously, I'm assuming that at that point you were probably working with people who did not necessarily have the same vision of peace for the people you're trying to mediate with. And I'm sure there's some point where you must have wanted maybe just to say, I give up.
Yeah. I became the chair of ECOWAS, I think 2002 or 2003, just 2 years after my becoming a president. Even before I became chair of ECOWAS, Côte d'Ivoire was in flames somehow. You remember how a soldier called General Gay overthrew President Bedier. And then Gay himself got slain when he tried to convert from military uniform to civilians, to hold on like Rawlings, and then to allow Bo to come in. So when I became president, 2001, the trouble was there. But then the parties, Kufuor's party, PDCI, and then which had gotten split between President Bedier and they were at odds with Mr. Babo. They wanted a fresh election because they said the intrusion of General Gay, who had disqualified them, wasn't constitutional. And so in my first year, I got invitation from President Babo to visit. And I had always, and to still look on Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire as twin nations, because the border between the two countries is very artificial. It divides same tribes, right from the coast to the northernmost part.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I went. There was a conference in Abidjan, and I got invited to attend the conference, in a way unprepared, because the whole thing was so complicated. But then I got in there, I was forced to make a statement. To me, the old president who had died of Kufuor, I had seen, I always believed he was a bit of a hero. Not a bit, he was truly a great nation builder. So I grabbed the occasion and remembered to tell the people, the factions, because President Bedier, Ouattara, they were all his boys. And he had built the country virtually, laid a diversified economy and all that. So I told them they had, all of the factions had been left a legacy by Kufuor, united the country regardless of tribe, religion, and so forth and so on, giving them good economy, good infrastructure. So it was a shame that they should tear the country up the way it was. So I appealed to them to make peace and to carry on using constitution. With that, well, I left, but they couldn't resolve this thing themselves.
No.
And then I think they got invited to France under President Chirac. So I was in Accra. I thought that was perhaps Francophonie or something. Invitation came from Chirac to me to attend that conference. They were attending in Paris, part called Marcoussis. So this thing, what role would I play in France? But Chirac sent a military plane to take me to Paris, and I went with a skeletal team to Marcoussis, and truly all the factions were there tearing at each other on the constitution to resolve this and that. Again, I made my little contribution came back to Ghana. Still, the three-cornered struggle couldn't be resolved. They resorted to Ghana. At that time, I think I had become ECOWAS chair. So they came to continue with the meetings on 3 occasions here in Accra. They were under my auspices. So they couldn't resolve the situation. I left office 2008. The troubles continued. And then President Babo had continued for 10 years, and they were not holding elections because of the confusion there.
Yeah.
I think 2010 or there was the election. And again, I was in Accra, retired from presidency. But an invitation came all the way from President Carter of the United States. He should have attended and we sent the message he couldn't come. And that was pleading that I would lead the team, observer team.
Okay.
So I went with the observer team to observe the election that took place. Naturally, I knew all the 3 leaders there. Babo was president. He received me in the presidency, and by Ouattara at his home, Bedie talked with, and the elections went on. First round of results came. That evening, Babo had invited me to the presidency for dinner.
Okay.
So I was sitting around the dinner table with him, his wife, and a few elders when the results started coming in. And I remember the result that came initially, Babo was leading. But it got to a point where I think he got stuck around 38% or so. And Ouattara followed with 32%. And Bedie brought up the rear with 25%, which meant Babo was never part of Kufuor's party.
Yes.
But Bedie, Ouattara were both PDCI. So to me, it was obvious that if the 2 would bury the hatchet and come together, they could take the power from Babo. But I don't know if it's ego or whatever.
Probably ego, but yeah.
I had to leave Côte d'Ivoire to Geneva because I was chair of a team there, an organization. I had to attend conference. So I left the situation only to hear that the violence had broken out in Côte d'Ivoire with some students led by Soro leading the team, backing initially Babo.
Yeah.
And Mr. Babo wasn't yielding to the results as declared by the Electoral Commission. So violence ensued, killing of people and destruction of things. So from Geneva, I tried to phone President Babo, and it was a fruitless effort. My calls were not being picked. But I had met his ADC called Colonel Dua. So I phoned Colonel Dua and came on the line, and I said, Colonel, I've been trying to speak with the president without success. Please let him know that I'm in Geneva. I want to talk with him. I wanted to entreat him to accept. Colonel Dua said he was going to report. So he put the receiver on. I didn't get a call back. So, incidentally, whilst I was president, I told you the talks had happened in Accra.
Yes.
3 times, 3 different occasions.
Yes.
And through that, I had met Soro, the student leader.
Okay.
And I got Soro's number, phoned Soro, and told him, Soro, you are a young man. You've got a future. You are burning your country. Please, think again. Let the people decide the results at the elections. And he calls me father. Yes, Daddy, I hear you. So please, I told him, think of your future in your country. And that was the end. The next thing I heard, he had switched from Babo, gone to see President Ouattara. And that's where the turning point came.
Yeah.
And then I think the French also used some troops there. And then President Babo was removed from office forcibly.
Yeah.
And then that was what gave the opening to President Ouattara.
Okay.
To come.
Across the continent, one tension keeps recurring. The generational divide. Right? Young people make up over 60%
now
of Africa's population, but far less are in leadership. Yeah? Ghana has done better than most countries in terms of peaceful transitions, most countries. But the political system remains largely a much older, gerontocratic
No.
Well, that's
Gerontocracy, no.
this is from a perspective.
They stick out. The very old people stick out.
Yes,
Most of the leaders come in quite young
and then
and tend to overstay.
okay,
But
and in fact, that's something
possible.
I'm actually going to ask you about the same that. So the question is not so much really about whether the next generation is ready. I think the next generation definitely is ready. It's whether the current are willing to let go.
No, it's the people generally.
Okay.
They should decide their leaders. They should make their leaders. So, if say they're going democratic and would use the ballot box,
Yes.
the people should make their leaders and make them. I myself, as an example, I've told you at the age of 30, I stood for parliament. It wasn't because anybody gave it to me. I had decided this was the way to go. And I was voted for. And that became the line. I didn't get the chance to become president till I was exactly on my 62nd birthday. I wanted to be president. But it was the people giving it to me. And if you take Nkrumah, for instance, Nkrumah must have been in his 30s or so.
Yeah, he was one of the youngest.
Yes. Yeah. Many of them were quite young. The only trouble is they get in and then they get consumed. And then they violate the electoral process.
There's a question I'm going to ask you later about that, the actual impact of that. So, in your opinion, then it's not so much. So, is it a cult? Is it a struggle? Is it a struggle primarily because of culture or structure?
It's not so much culture.
It's more structure.
It's perhaps the nature of power.
That's it.
Power. You see, if you go in, say, under a constitution that enjoins people suffrage, vote, and you convince. If you are a coup d'etat person and then you grab.
That's a different story, yeah.
But if you go in on the constitution, you swear by the constitution to work within the ambit of constitution. And then the time is up for you to go.
You should go.
And just because
and now I'm going to
the intoxication of power.
That's for me, we need to speak at length. But then my question then becomes, again, this 60% of youth. Okay, while you say that it should be people who elect the next leaders.
Yes.
I completely agree with that. But my question is, and okay, it's always been something I personally that I've seen. The youth are being mobilized only during election seasons. After that, nobody.
The current youth,
yes,
I tend to believe that they are much smarter than their fathers.
They are.
So if they would keep their eyes wide open and would vote appropriately, thinking of posterity and themselves into the future and what they expect of their leaders, they know the world far better than their parents. I tell you, it would become harder and harder for leaders to hoodwink and cheat. But if they go in for whatever reasons, these days people talk of monetization.
Yes.
You sell yourself into slavery.
That's it.
Then you must suffer
the consequences as well.
And you see, an ancient saying is that people get the government they deserve. We got exposed into the modern system of governance.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
No. We're still young from that perspective.
We are very much in early stages of transition. And education should, in a way, enable and empower the peoples across the board to read between lines and say, this guy that wants me to vote for him, given background, given the work he's been doing, the society he lives in and the responsibility he shows, perhaps of the 2 or 3 people vying, he should be the person to follow. And then once you put him in there, you should wait till the next round of election. See the governance, how he's doing it, and whether it's an inclusive system he's running, or is motivated by tribe, or religion, or is it money and the corruption that you get to know the be good leader.
The character you've put in place. Now, speaking of character, and now the aspect of elections and everything, across Africa we've seen constitutions revised.
Yeah.
Right? Terms have been lifted.
Yeah.
And leaders clinging to power long after their mandate expired.
But that's what I just said. To.
Yes. Yeah. The reasons may vary. They're talking about maybe stability, they're talking about continuity, or they're talking about popular demand. But the outcome is pretty much always the same. Systems built to serve the people are reshaped to preserve the leader. Right? That's very key for me to understand, or rather to get that out. So in 2008, as your final term drew to a close, you were urged publicly and privately to to stay on, right? The constitutional amendment was available or possible, and the political appetite was definitely there, but you walked away. You walked away, yeah? At the time when Presidents for Life is still a pattern across the continent.
I'll tell you.
Yes.
I had described as a long apprenticeship in politics. I've told
So
you,
you've
I
been
went
there,
in
yes, you have been there
at
for...
the age 27. I had suffered prison detentions twice.
Mm.
The first time was 72, January. Got picked deputy foreign minister, age 32, 33. Dumped in prison in Accra, where I was kept for 1 year, 3 months.
Wow.
I left my wife at home with 4 kids, small young children. And I hadn't made any special provision because I couldn't have anticipated
Being arrested.
And
Detained.
then whilst I was in, the fifth born came out.
Oh.
You could imagine the torture. And I had time to think no, there was something wrong with the political systems which needed to be thought through properly. And then from there, when I was released, people were urging me, politics was dirty, go out and seek some full and happy for international thing. I refused because I thought the challenge was there for people who had been exposed to the positive to stay the course, to try to change the thing. So 79, I got elected back to, but unfortunately my party split, and so we lost power. And but I was in parliament and part of the leadership of the opposition. The then president, President Liman, a good man, again lacking practice. He hadn't held any office before. He was just a civil servant. In fact, I'd worked with him in the foreign ministry. He was deputy foreign minister. He was an officer. I got to know him. He was a good man, but it wasn't his fault. He'd been chosen by his party, and so somehow some members of his own party linked with Rawlings, and they kicked him out. New Year's Eve, Rawlings came in with military might, and they held the country down for 19 long years.
Yes.
So when I got the chance, I just wanted to let the nation know that if the people would really know that the real power resided in them, the constitution that came said sovereignty of the land was in the people. If they would know that and wouldn't give in on base of we are poor, he's from my tribe, he's of this religion, and just think of themselves as individuals.
Now, do you think Africa fully reckons with the institutional damage caused by people who overstay their welcome?
Oh, naturally. See, orderly societies must be the way for transformation. And orderliness should mean societies must be underpinned by enlightened constitutions.
Okay.
So if you use the constitution to get in there and you swear, if you have any faith at all, you swear to hold office by the constitution. And you get in there, you like the seat so much, when it's time for you to go, you find a way to. That one is betrayal of the first order.
But we will then elect them again because they're going to come in a different promise to say that we will not do the same as what we did last time.
No, the point is, would their promises be genuine?
No.
They corrupt the entire system.
And we should know that
then
by now.
They compromise the electoral systems, and then they use the security to cover the people. So once you violate the thing, you are illegitimate, and it shouldn't be allowed.
Okay. So now, going to shift gear again.
Yes.
Go back to economics now. So basically, gold has built empires and broken kingdoms. Gold. Empires and broken kingdoms. It has made finance colonization at one point, and in a twist of irony, it is also funds the aftermath of what colonization was. But in today's Ghana, gold mining is not just about wealth at this point in time. It's about sovereignty, which we talked about before, environmental stewardship, which Africa obviously is now gearing itself or leaning more into, and actually the rule of law. But yesterday was a story I was reading about visas that are going to be restricted to Chinese nationals from a certain region. And this talks to illegal mining.
Where were you reading this thing from?
In the newspaper yesterday.
Ghana paper?
Yes.
Which paper is this?
Which paper was it? Daily graphic. So they're going to be restricting visas for Chinese nationals.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it, and I don't know the motivation.
Okay.
No, the research backing. Is it policy? I don't know.
Okay, but what I was talking more to is the general aspect of Galamsey.
No doubt at all.
Yeah. So Galamsey,
it's a menace.
It has been scarring landscapes, basically, and has poisoned rivers, it's scarring landscapes.
Yeah.
But it's also hollowing out state authority in itself. But let me explain where I'm. Sorry, do you want to take a sip?
No.
Yeah. And it's increasingly not just necessarily a local problem. It's basically part of a transnational economic power of powerful interests, and some of them are foreign. And one of the things that we cannot ignore at this point in time is China's role in the whole aspect of Galamsey.
It's not just China.
You have Western multinationals as well. Difference is the Western multinationals are not as visible because they have long-term concessions.
We have to be careful here.
That's what I need to be. So that's what
we have to be careful here. The whole idea is you talk governance of a polity. The whole idea should be ability to enforce the laws of the land.
The laws of the land. But are those laws of the land compromised when the state's ability to manage an extractive industry, whether it's Chinese, whether it's whoever, is a compromise from that perspective then?
There's a compromise that should be blamed on the state authority first.
Okay.
They entrust you with government, expect you to be able to protect and hold interests of the polity. That's why you have the agencies, security agencies, whether it's army, whether it's police, immigration, they all come under government. So if for whatever reason the government compromised, especially by forces from outside the land in this way, and in a way has to be held accountable.
Where does that accountability then, because there's the difference between where does legality and legitimacy get blurred?
Very technical. Laws that are not enforceable are not laws. And legitimacy is, in a way, entitlement, natural entitlement. And you become entitled to say the natural wealth in the land of a defined area, like a nation, Gold Coast, Ghana. When you are not from here, the people here, sovereign people, they haven't given you
the right.
A right.
Yeah.
And you come and you are messing up the land and water, and even the people, in a way, and you talk legitimacy. It can't be. The thing is for government to think out issues that would enable government to enforce the legality that would also give the legitimacy to the people of Ghana. And are in place just as trustees for the people. The foreigners may come and go.
Yes.
Why should we give this at all? You were talking of visa.
Yeah. Well, they're doing
people
they're doing restrictions.
Whoever comes these days is not coming with pistol in hand.
No.
At our heads. They come in some pretext of coming to do legitimate
business or extractive or
and
investment.
So if you are not discreet enough to know this guy really cannot come and do the right things.
So the buck then starts at the government. The buck stops at the government in terms of being able to say accountability, to say that if you open this up for us to be exploited, then it's the government who should actually to shift again.
But I should want to remark that the way the world is opening up, they say nobody is an island. No country, no person.
No man is an island.
It's interdependence.
Yeah.
And so it should be benchmark of good governance to depth with negotiating skills.
Okay.
We have needs, and they may come with superior technology, they may come with capital, they even come with markets. Definitely they are coming for something. You're going to talk with them, know what they're coming in for, and you should know what you want from them. So then you try to strike the balance.
Do you think Africa's current debt profile, right, is a reflection of strategic mismanagement or missteps, or simply a consequence of living in a multipolar world? You mentioned about now we're in a different kind of
multipolar world, nobody can escape from these days.
Given.
But we again have to factor in, again, a bit of history. Ghana was the first country, sub-Sahara, to have gained independence.
Yes.
And it was as recent as 1957. Our leadership then had a vision. And I want to believe meant very well. When we talked of freedom, the national motto fashioned then before it was freedom and justice. They must have meant it. But then you talk freedom and justice, you work these ideals through deftness. You must have had experience. It means administratively you must be up and doing. Administrative competence should imply knowledge and experience and all that. In those times, how many of us had been exposed?
No.
So we're taking advantage of time neocolonialism got coined. They come in and sometimes with promises and flattery, and then before you know, grabbing your right arm off
and they've taken
and leaving you with a pittance. Unfortunately, once you taste power too, you are not careful, and that was the first time many of them were tasting power. It gets into your head.
Absolutely.
And I want to, instead of blame, I want to say Africa is in transition. In most parts. But the main thing is, once you know a problem, then you begin to solve it. Education is key, and sensible, deep education, which should open up the mind and vistas, so for you we see and see clearly. And then the tolerance within ourselves, because we must know. That's why I say I'm promoting this Africa public interest media. So once we get critical and we appreciate our continent is so naturally endowed. When you talk of gold, the source of all the problems. Geography or geology of Ghana, everywhere you scratch, you find gold. So it obtains with most of our continental nations. Go to Congo DR, for instance.
Yes.
We have got everything, water courses, and land. They say Africa alone has about 60% of all that is left throughout the world. And then the population, now about 4 billion population, as you say, 60% of whom are young people. I say smarter than their fathers. If you are not going to show awareness of this, and so at the same time show awareness that we are part of the globalization process, where we can't be an island. We prepare ourselves. So even as other people come for either trade or industry or whatever,
we value ourselves to a point where we know we're not going to be exploited.
This is the point.
We need to know what our self-worth is.
Self-aware. And so far, the talk has been at the leadership level.
It's not permeated.
Organization of African Unity, those times were to liberalize that. Now we've come to the African Union, we talk of economic emancipation. But it's through negotiation, it's not through warfare.
No.
And the educated youth, this is where they must be. 30 years these days, it's like 50 years of former times. They are so well informed, they are smart.
So that instant coffee analogy that I'm using is that they're expecting to, once they get into power...
Unless you are a magician. People shouldn't expect these things from you. The main thing is we are back to education. And nurturing, if we can, from home. So again, back to policies. You see, it's intergenerational thing. All of, say, my generation. Perhaps a generation ahead of yours. Yes. And your generation, another generation there. If we look ahead, that Africa, as I said earlier, sitting among the continents, all want to come because they see the natural reserves of wealth and abundance and everything here. And even the market within a generation or two come. So our generation is concerned for the posterity of our people. Everything we do, we should be guided.
Where the future lies.
Yes, where the future lies.
In a region that's basically marked by coups, terrorism, and fragile democracies, Ghana has remained an anchor of stability. That there's no doubt. But today's global security architecture is shifting. Yeah, and with that comes new expectations. The US and other partners increasingly see Ghana not just as a stable ally, but as a potential security leader. Joint exercises like Obangame Games and Flintlock to jungle warfare training in being positioned to take a more regional responsibility. But with leadership comes pressure, and with alignment comes scrutiny. Is Ghana ready to assume a more assertive regional security role, and does the country want that responsibility?
Country have the choice in this.
They might turn around and
it's
say,
existential. If you do not have security,
You
then
have
you may get thrown back into
chaos.
Yeah. But the thing is, Achia's thing was there from way back. It's not a recent creation.
Achiasi has been there for some time.
It's not a recent creation because perhaps the first priority of government should be security. And we knew it right from Nkrumah's time and even before. The creation of the United Nations was designed for what it's turning out to be or not. It's made everybody aware. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is such a truism.
True. True.
And so great neighbors, yes, they are ahead in terms of technologies and wealth and so forth and so on. To me, everybody should uphold the sanctity of humanity.
The fundamentals, basically.
Humanity.
Yeah. We are very rich in resources.
Yes.
And we've got
They want to come here.
Yeah, the East and West are trying to quote us.
They want to come here and take our uranium for nothing.
In 1970, you led Ghana's delegation.
Yes.
10 years later, you were in Washington.
Yeah.
Engaging IMF. On Ghana's economic path. We've Ghana's always tried non-aligned, but we still have East and West and what have you trying to pull us in a manner to say, okay, fine, here we want to help you in investment, we want to be able to do this, but there are strings attached.
But that's where the negotiating skills come in.
Which you are talking about.
You shouldn't expect charity from any quarter.
Yes.
Whatever they come, or whenever they come for something. And it should be the smart government here. So these people, they are coming, they are offering. Isn't that they just fear Greeks even when they bear gifts?
But the question, my issue then becomes leaders who are sitting in position to say, what's in it for me? And
that's personal corruption.
And that's what we tend to always, that's what we live through every election cycle.
Yeah, but
what's in it for?
Again, if we come to accept that sovereignty bottom is in the person. You are my leader because I voted for you.
Yes.
It's on my say so you become leader. And I see now you've gotten in there to feather your bed at my expense. Find ways and means to make you account.
Most of the time it will be wait until the next ballot comes.
Like tolerance comes, now anarchy might come to rule.
Anarchy might be a problem because...
And so I don't like it.
That's what I was going to say.
I understand Winston Churchill was the guy who said democracy was perhaps a very difficult system to work. But of all the systems they know, democracy was still the best. So it's just a balancing act between our being patient and doing things methodically so that the guy that would get to a place and then turn around to think he could outsmart all of us, we bide our time.
But then,
and then we bounce.
I'm going to go back to the youth and I'm asking this question. Are we courting demographic dividends where we can actually take advantage of the youth and the energy they have, or are we courting demographic detonation?
Why do we take advantage of our youth? The youth is our progeny.
No, not advantage in the sense of demographic dividends being able to reap what they have
the
to
support
offer,
of
vis-a-vis demographic detonation, where people are going to say
the uprising.
Enough is enough.
The Arab Spring, for instance,
yes,
was a detonation. But then, sadly, the governance, the improved governance, that is still a challenge because things went haywire. This is where it's the balance, chief attributes that should guide human society. Because it's not a perfect world anywhere.
No.
But if you are balancing, you know the pluses and minuses, and then you find a mean where you live even with some hiccups.
The price of partnerships.
Price of partnerships.
But you've sat across negotiating tables.
Yes.
In Washington, Moscow, and Beijing.
Yes.
So you not only understand diplomacy, you also understand debt. But in this slightly. And we said beyond security, there's another frontier where influence has been extended. We're talking about infrastructure, loans, long-term economic leverage. Comes for free. You can't do anything.
No.
And that reminds me of a line from who was the author? Lippmann?
Walter Lippmann.
Walter Lippmann. And he was asked what he feared most in the world, what he feared for the future of the world.
And what did he say?
And what did he say? He said, China on the loose. Take that as you may, but I was looking at some of the statistics, and 1/3 of Africa's ports, airports, and infrastructure
by China
have been built by China. So this is decades later. Yeah, Africa's gold fields, political backrooms, are the question still answered. And this you talked about. The question is this: what happens when power shifts but accountability does not?
They have abdicated
Should have.
their rights.
They should.
See, to Africa public interest media using digital technologies. Now, a problem confronting China now is a population decline. It also got their culture, like this authority. If Africa is awakening, and truly if Africa's population by 2050 would top 2 billion, it means Africa
Is
as a unit
should be calling the shots.
do that.
We should be calling
But
the
we
shots.
must have the awareness.
Again, and it falls back to exactly
Awareness and self-confidence. That comes in. It's coming to build say, a road or a port or the agreement. It's not forcing us. China brings here. Is our government going to ask China to give us the loan or whatever? And we must negotiate. Of course, we may need the port so urgently. We might not negotiate so tightly.
But we don't end up in a situation like Sri Lanka, which ended up 99-year lease. Is,
Yes.
That's selling your soul to. I'm not calling, and I mean this I don't mean this in a way. Selling your soul to the devil, as a phrase. It's a phrase, not
so
what I'm
we
thinking.
learn from it.
Yeah.
You think the successor government to the government that sold 99 years, would it go the same way?
Answers are.
So it's a learning process, learning curve.
Yeah.
And this is where, so we need this public interest media initiative. We should launch this
Immediately.
and even as people get more and more aware. And then with the increasing population and a very informed youth, Ghana now, the way we are going with education, I can anticipate within a decade, the literacy rate will be so high. So, and with the new technologies too, you can't hide anything for too long.
No.
People would get to know.
Actually, you can't at all. Yeah. Not at all. I want to start ending this up because I know we've been here for a while, but I really appreciate your time. There's two questions I want to ask you. This one.
Yeah.
On a scale of achievement, despair.
Yeah.
Find Africa today.
Africa is perhaps the most ancient of lands, but in current terms, perhaps the youngest. And without hope, then you die. Africa is too young to die. It must be imbued with great hope. Say, when you get to know and you travel the world, we've got more than others. And coming into our own a bit late and a bit too slowly. But with time and when we resolve to give ourselves the requisite leadership, I tell you, within or so, might surprise ourselves for the positive achievements.
There's a lot of people who do, you know how everybody said, look at how Singapore came up and how they managed to do everything as quickly as they did. And there's a lot of comparisons on this continent and talk about the achievements that Rwanda has made. Although I was talking to somebody and they said
accidental developments. I do not use them
they are an outlier.
As example for Africa.
They're an outlier in terms of
outliers indeed.
In terms of what Africa has been able
Singapore,
to achieve.
Rwanda, there.
But so, what is the most underappreciated achievement of post-independence Africa? Underappreciated. What we've managed to achieve that has never really been fully appreciated in post-independence Africa.
Africa awakening itself. 1960s or that What did, say, take West Africa? What did the street man in the street of Accra know? Say Guinea-Bissau, d'Ivoire.
Nothing.
Now, bit by bit, we're getting to know. We're traveling, even though it's a bit rather slowly.
And not only because of football. Not because of the Africa Cup or the World Cup.
Of the football, everything
Football
is sports,
it brings us together,
entertainment,
yes, yeah.
fashion.
Yeah, fashion as well. Yeah.
See, they say culture is dynamic. These days, everybody wears jeans and like that before.
No.
But we are really global. Africa has it's really rising like President. Africa
Rising.
So we shouldn't be daunted at all.
Okay.
We must keep pressing, and then with national systems, we can really hasten our movement.
And that leads me, that's a nice way to actually bring now this to a close. Legacies are not built solely in office,
No.
but in the years after. And you have demonstrated that very, very well. What one leaves behind is not by roads or policies, but in words, wisdom, and what future generations will carry forward.
Okay.
As an elder statesman, now watching Africa from the sidelines, but yet still deeply invested, your voice does carry weight.
Thank you.
And your words, Mr. President, still very much matter.
Thank you.
If you had 5 minutes off camera to Africans across the continent.
Off camera.
Well, you're going to say it on camera. But if I was to say, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
if you're off camera and you talk to the young generations of Africans across the continent, what would you tell them about leadership, integrity, and destiny? So leadership, and if you were just to say to them, young Africans,
your continent, Africa, is a very great continent, richly endowed, that would make many other continents even envious of us. And man from creation has always been searching for his maker on equal, fair basis, according to enlightened laws. This is what I want to tell you of what I believe and what I see in the future.
Mine is to say thank you so much, President Kufuor, for your time and for the enlightenment. I like the concept of Africa rising. I know we've said it before, but the way you say it now, it comes out in a manner that suggests, yes, there is impetus for it to actually happen. Now, leadership doesn't end when the camera stops rolling. It echoes quietly in policy legacies, in institutional memory, and in the advice an elder statesman gives when no one's recording, although this time we were recording. Today, President Kufuor reminded us that real power is not found in pronouncements, but in perspective. He spoke of ideals, of hard choices, of the dream of Pan-Africanism still seeking structure, and a continent walking the tightrope between youthful ambition and old systems. But above all, he reminded us that legacy is not about what you hold on to, it's about what you pass on. If the future belongs to the bold, then maybe wisdom belongs to those willing to let it go. Food for thought. That's it for Panel 54. Thank you so much for joining us. If it made you pause, reflect, or even reframe, do remember to share it and do tag us in. You can find us on our social media handle at Panel54Pod or your favorite streaming platform. That's all for now. I'd like to say once again, thank you so much for joining us and for agreeing to inspire us on this episode.
You have drained me.
I've drained you. I'm feeling it as well. But until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember to keep the lens clean. This is Panel 54, a global perspective through an African lens.